Hi everyone, my name is Olumide Idowu and we are live again today for another edition of Climate Wednesday. So today we are going to be talking about a very important topic, ESG implication of COVID-19, and we are going to be focusing on food production. And I'm very sure that a lot of you have been able to listen to us last week when we had a conversation with ESG reporting with one of our guests, Similade. And today we are going to be talking more about ESG as we are focusing on this month. But today we are going to be doing a lot around implication of COVID-19 and focus on food security. And I can bet you that our guest today is going to do a lot of justice into this conversation. And she's a very passionate food enthusiast, somebody that understands the farming space, understands the agriculture space very well. She'll be telling us and giving us understanding of the ESG implication on COVID-19. And I'm very sure we are all ready to be part of this conversation today. And let me quickly say that today's conversation is going to be more deeper because a lot of people want to actually know the angle of how has food supply been impacted. A lot of people want to hear about the engagement strategy, investors' responsibility, and what have you. As we all know, COVID-19 pandemic is having a huge impact on global food chains, with transport and board restriction impacting the flow of production, free options for physical distancing in production or processing factory. So, as part of our engagement today, we're going to be focusing on ESG implication on COVID-19 and how is affecting the food production. So, I want you to stay with us and let us have this conversation. So, the impact of COVID-19 on the global food chain has been dramatic, as a lot of people already know. A lot of issues have been going on. Let me just say that if you are watching us on this platform, I don't know which platform you're watching us now. You can still watch us on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. And that's where we are streaming live. Send in your questions, get engaged. You can also listen later and share this with your friends and family so that they can also be part of this conversation today. Once again, let me say thanks to our partners, supporter, CSDevNet, PACJA, UNDP for continuous support and amplifying the voice of what we do every week. Thank you so much. And we're looking for more opportunities and partnership to make sure that Climate Wednesday being a consistent platform to share information and to create and build climate smart generation across Africa. So today, let me bring our guest on board. Welcome, Rinmicit Aboki. Thank you for coming on board today to be one of our speaker. Like I said, you have been part of us for many years, and we are back here again. We're having you on our new platform, which is the video platform for people to see our speaker one-on-one on what they are doing and how they are engaging more younger people in the space. Thank you very much, and we are very happy to have you.
Thank you very much, Olumide, Mr. Climate. Thank you, Climate Wednesday, for having me.
Thank you so much. So moving forward, so that we don't take much of our time, I'm sure our guests, our viewers at home are actually waiting to listen and hear what we have in stock for them today and what you are going to be telling us. So, quick one, for the sake of people that have never met you, have never seen you before, can you tell us about yourself and actually what do you do? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Like you said, my name is Rinmicit Aboki. I am a development practitioner, and basically, my key area of interest are research, gender, climate change, and I have a new trend now, a new interest, which is food security and food production. And this came up because, like I told you, I've been in research and emerging issues, trying to link the issue of climate change, food security, even trying to link climate change and human security, and the recent conflicts we have in Nigeria. So we've been able to see a nexus of that. And so that's simply what I do. And like you said, I'm a climate change enthusiast.
Thank you very much. I'm very, very sure that a lot of people are waiting to hear from you. And I'm sure that you are also waiting to give us those information that we actually need for our growth and the development of this space. Like I said, if you are watching us from anywhere across the world, today's conversation is focusing on ESG implications of COVID-19, focusing on food production. Thank you very much once again, and thanks for what you are doing as a food enthusiast and a climate expert as well. So let me move forward by asking, acknowledging the effect of COVID-19, how has this generally affected climate change?
Okay, let's see how COVID has affected climate change, right? Is that what you said, Mr.
Yes,
Climate?
yes,
Okay,
you are right.
yes, okay. Okay. The COVID-19 pandemic, we know, started in Asia, and gradually, people didn't understand it. We actually thought it was just something that would come and go. And then gradually the world started seeing restrictions, lockdowns, and all that. We both had positive and negative effects on climate change. In as much as air travel reduced drastically, the air became so clean, air pollution reduced, peaks, mountains were being seen, especially the Himalayan mountains, Mount Everest. People had not even seen that the clarity of the peak in a long time. There was reduced pollution. People were not going to work, commuters and all that. So air pollution reduced drastically in places like China, especially, research has it that it reduced to like 25%. People like India, because the factories were not working, people were not going out, people were at home. However, the negative side was now people were at home and increase electricity, increase heating. And the thing is, when people were at home, takeouts, people were now ordering food. The food industry somehow got to be open, and they're just doing delivery. So the delivery services, and we know that many of these companies, especially looking down here in Africa and some parts, is we don't use biodegradable, it's single-use plastic. So you find out that there was increase in pollution, increase in generator, especially those of us around here that sometimes we don't get power, electricity on the power grid. So generators were coming on. So the issue of pollution continued. And also, the masks we were all wearing was single-use plastic. And also it became a problem disposing this mass became a nuisance and became a problem because it now started polluting even our areas. It started polluting everywhere. And also on the positive side, which I didn't say, was our aquatic life. The transportation had reduced and sea travel. In fact, people were not going out to fish anymore. And in some places like South Africa, and I believe you saw that video, that dolphins and other species of fish were coming right to the shore, and we could see aquatic life. And also on the negative, we saw it here in Nigeria and sub-Saharan Africa and also some other parts of the world, increased deforestation. Now people had access and had time on their they had time, and also the local authorities and the states and the government authorities that were inhibiting, illegal deforestation and felling of trees could not go on with their jobs. So, people were going in and logging. Deforestation continued on a high rate. And also the issue of poaching, illegal poaching and going out to for hunters, it increased. We saw that during COVID-19, and that invariably affected climate change.
Hmm, that was a speech. Thank you so much. And I'm sure for our
Thank you, Mr. Clement.
guests, for our listeners, they've been able to understand how the effect of COVID-19 has actually impacted climate change. And a lot of activities have gone wrong, a lot have happened, and things are going one or two ways. And I'm very sure that they've been able to pick one or two things from what you've actually shared with us. So, moving on, what are the implications of COVID-19, especially concerning the ESG that we are talking about? What are the implications of COVID-19?
Well, there are implications, like countries are still coming out, those restrictions are still there. And, basically, like you said, the ESG stands for environmental, social governance, and then to just see how this would come up, profitability, the sustainability. And so we actually see that it's having a huge impact, especially in the area which we're talking about, food. The global food chain, transportation, the border restrictions, physical distancing, and all that, stricter travel, immigration policies, constrained availability of harvest, the food chain, it has disrupted supply. And the food supply, which and most of our listeners have understood, is that there was harvest disruption. From the time when the lockdowns and all that, especially here in Nigeria, I remember my state, Plateau, which is an agric state. During the lockdown, they had to like lift up few days for farmers, and then gradually they realized that if farmers didn't go out, we would have, the issue of hunger. And that the SDGs are trying to get into the issue of zero hunger. So they needed to be a balance. So at some point, they now said lockdown restrictions were not attainable to farmers. So you only had to be a farmer and you could go out, but then you'd keep COVID-19 protocols if you were more than how many on a farm and if you're not from a household in the farm. So all these things, came up. And then we can actually see that it disrupted, production. Now we had the issue of, yes, we actually had people harvesting, but how would they now move their products to, getting right down to the retailer? And we see that COVID-19 disrupted this in a very large scale. We had food wastage, we had the issue of transportation. People couldn't transport from one place to the other. And I would use Nigeria as as an example. Gradually they now started saying, okay, only agric, only people in the agricultural sector could travel interstate. I'm sure you remember those restrictions. So you needed to only have is either eggs coming from the north down south, or fruits or cassava or yams, cattle. So you needed to only be in the agricultural sector because they realized that it was hampering food production and food security all in the nation. And not just in Nigeria, but worldwide. It was something we saw worldwide because air travel, sea travel, and many other things were put on a hold. So COVID-19 invariably affected the issue of, the economic part we're looking at, and then also the sustainability, because in a way, pollution was reducing in one way, but in another way, it was increasing because we had food wastage. We also had the issue of not being, sustainable. It wasn't being sustainable at the end of the day because COVID-19 actually hampered and affected the food cycle and the food chain and the food supply.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Viewers, I'm sure if you are watching from anywhere across the world, this is one of the conversation you don't want to miss. And our speaker today has been dishing out the implications of COVID-19 on the ESG. Thank you so much for that contribution now. What is the link between the ESG and food production? What do you think we should be looking at? What is the link, and what is the importance of incorporating ESG in food production?
Okay, thank you. The link, we cannot it's there. The linkage is there, the environment, we're looking at sustainability, we're looking about how we can, put this, harness it together. And that link, it's we have to act sustainably. We should not be, the issue of ESG, people are looking at it, okay, it's going to cost us a lot and all that. But then we should not even be looking at the cost, but the return on investment. It's something we can actually we can actually, the return on investment is something that we can actually monitor. And then the sustainability for it in the food industry is to transform the food industry. The issue of environmental, economic, social factors are being incorporated. So industry more, it will harness, accountability, it will harness even for governance, transparent for government transparencies, and then the focus employee relations, diverse issues of climate change, the pollution, waste management, water use. All this would come into play, that it actually even help, for us to measure the outcome of all these things, in the relevant context. So there is that linkage. But gradually when things begin, people don't understand, and then they try to say, oh no, it's you're trying to take us out, we're not going to be able to work, is this going to be sustainable, our jobs? But then we're looking for sustainable ways to do things. For example, I'll give you we're trying to move from issue of using green to reduce waste and greenhouse effect gases. Now the issue of fossil fuels, we're trying to reduce it. And then if you look at in the agricultural sector, we can actually use palm oil, for biodiesel. And things are now beginning to looking for a more sustainable way to keep our climate, to keep our environment, and then to help secure and harness the issue of climate change. And you see that agri sector, we talked about it, is linked so much with transportation, because you cannot just get into agri without transportation and all these things. And we know that it's closely linked together. And then it's beyond just greenhouse effects, but then is to bring low impact on the environment. How are we going to bring this down? So you see, there's that close link that we need the issue of sustainability in the issue of the ESG framework. We need to consider these things, the environment, socially, and then governance. It's something that we need to bring and incorporate so much in the food industry, and it will help us to reach that level of profitability that we have always wanted.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much. The more you share some key points and key values from your words, it shows to me that let me say there is still hope for the continent, and there's still a way forward for us when it comes to the food production and how we are managing it related to environment, social, and governance, which is something that is very, very key. Thank you so much for that input. Can COVID 19 have been said to affect food production? And if yes, how so? You've mentioned, but also, how do you think we should talk more about it?
Okay, yes, COVID-19, like I had started saying, it really affected food production. And I would like to use my local context, Nigeria, for example. When it began, the lockdowns really started around March, April. I believe. And, those were the beginning of the farming season right down into July. And it affected, workers. You couldn't get tractors to your farms if you had a large farm, because, most of our farm are not fully mechanized. They depend on the government, and government institutions and parastatals, or some private owned companies that help to go and help with the mechanized farming, with the tractors and all that. So those manpower, they were not there. And then also the issue of seed and seedlings. Transportation was invariably affected, and people were not moving from one state to the other. And then also the thing about workforce, that most of the farmlands are in the rural or semi-urban areas. And so in the urban areas, even those that were involved in farming could not travel to the rural areas because the issue of the rural areas, people were afraid of the issue of the transmission of the COVID-19 the various, people at some point in Nigeria and in some parts of the world, they actually thought that COVID-19 was only for elites and people living in the urban areas. So there was even the issue of transportation, people going to the rural areas, and people were afraid and say, no, you're coming to give us this big man's, in quotes, this big man's disease or this urban disease. And so there was that fear. And so invariably, the issue of supply was affected. The issue of harvest was affected because if now you needed this thing my people do, they do it like a cluster harvest, cluster farming. So people could not come together in clusters. What they would do is they would, for example, say, today we're going to, can I use it as an example, Mr. Climate? I hope you don't mind.
You can. No problem.
Okay, so for example, if I would say I'm going to Mr. Clement's farm in, let's say somewhere in Lagos, and we had a cluster of farmers, and we're all together, maybe we're 15 or 20, but you know that in the COVID-19 protocols, we couldn't come together. That many people couldn't come together different from different households. So it would be we're going to help you seed or help you farm plant seeds, or we'll come and help you, harvest. So all those things affected the harvesting. It affected even now, even if people were able to harvest, where were they carrying their produce to? Because you remember, even that time, there was just so much, people could not harvest. And then, but something happened that the online market started. I know if you remember that. So people now started using technology more. Okay, we would off take people that understood and had access to, the internet. They'll let you know, okay, we have so amount of tomatoes here, who needs it and how do we get it? And then they actually started because courier services were open. But that was just really for the urban and semi-urban areas. But in the rural areas, we found out that food wastage was, immense. So COVID-19 affected the food chain right from the farmers to the middlemen, right, harvesting, right to transportation in every sector, and even going right to the stores. That even in the developed countries, you found out that some foods were not being seen in the stores, and you found out that even when people, the days of going to shop, people were hoarding, people were taking more than they needed because they would go right to the stores and they would not find things. And still right now in the developed countries, there's still things that you wouldn't see if you go right to the stores. There's just some food you would not find because these foods are either exported or they're imported from other countries, and then the issue of the travel ban, and then the issue of immigration and all that. So these things has affected the food chain. COVID-19 invariably has affected our food chain and food supply, which I think it would take a little while for us to normalize.
Thank you for using me as an example. I think people will be able to relate to that your illustration, which I think is very very key for this kind of conversation. We need to just make use of case studies so that people will be able to understand what we are actually dishing out. Thank you so much. Can COVID-19 have been said to affect food production? Okay, I think we've covered that. Let me quickly move forward to go into the investors angle. So, how can an investor assist in increasing the global food chain during the ongoing pandemic? Do you think the investors have done well? Do you think the investors have been able to put justice in supporting the issue of issue of food production, or you just mentioned of movement of the food from one end to another, from farm to market? Do you think investors have actually increased the global food chain during the ongoing pandemic?
Okay, thank you. There's this adage that when you're faced with new problems, you need new solutions. The pre-COVID-19, the food those in the food supply and not demand, they've been doing their best, even though we know that they've been hiccups here and there, trying to get food security. Some would say food sovereignty. And then the issue also of food security is a very complex issue, which, even with the SDGs trying to address the issue of zero hunger and all that, we've been on that space. So Lumide, this there's food everywhere, food nowhere, because you'll find out that there's so much surplus in another place, and in another place, lack and hunger on the other side. Now COVID-19 and post COVID-19, I believe that, the pandemic hits the world in a way that people did not even understand it. It affected people emotionally, mentally, financially, and all that. Are investors doing all they can? Yes. Can more be done? Yes. And now it's to bring innovation into all these things. How then can we help? You see, I'll go back, and I like to use my local context, and I like to use Nigeria. The issue of to have seeds, for us to have a seed bank in Nigeria is needed. Yes, they might have private seeds and all that, but you see, if you check, for my viewers, those of you that know the doomsday vaults, you could check it out. There are all those very large vaults that keep the seeds available. And then the issue of agriculture down to the local level, access to fertilizers and all that, where our local farmers able to get that. And then we need to go beyond. We need to think of other ways. Now we need to incorporate technology. We need to, those phones that were given to the farmers, what happened to them? What happened to them? There were some phones that were distributed, to farmers in Nigeria. Were those phones, are they still there? We need to be able to merge agro and technology, agrotech. There's actually an NGO that I'm part of. It's an organization in Africa. On agrotech, it came up from Hope. From the Paris, when we went to Paris, it came up from there. We are actually a group of young people decided to come up with this. Okay, agrotech, it's like an interface for the farmers and technology and the government. So we need those kind of for us to come up. Businessmen should be able to say, okay, this is where we get this from this area, and then how do we move it in a sustainable way? How do we move it? People are now talking about freeze drying. People are now talking about preservation. How can we improve preservation without altering the food, the proper nature of the food? And when we actually do those preservations and then the transportation, we should actually talk about sustainability, because we're trying to reduce the issue of carbon emission. So now, are we now going to, instead of getting cars and trailers on the road, can we now think about rail? Can we think about sea? How then can we connect with a businessman there in America or in the Netherlands? And how can we move, for example, our pear from Nigeria, our cocoa? How then do we actually get to the farmer, that the farmer is being paid? We need to begin to think about harnessing and bringing in technology. How can we get this? And for the farmer now to be, maybe, for example, a portal that a farmer that has about 100 bags of cocoa would now send it in and say, I have 100 bags of cocoa in, for example, in Ogun State. And then you now know, okay, as a businessman, I want to offtake that 100 bags of cocoa, and I pay the farmer, and then I send it out or prepare it, or I take it now to a company that would now process this and now send it out to other countries or wherever you're going to, or to shops and all that. For example, the same thing with ginger, the same thing with hibiscus. Not just doing things the old way, but then to educate our farmers too, and then to have that portal that, okay, we can offset, we can take off. We're trying to look at the economic benefits and how sustainable the social, so that everyone is now benefiting. We're not leaving anyone behind. So I think we need to leverage on new innovations, especially around technology. We cannot do without technology. At this time, we need technology invariably, more than ever.
Thank you very much. We need technology like now, and it's very important that a lot of local communities as well will be looking forward to tap into this technology so that they can,
Yeah.
improve their work and improve what they do when it comes to food production. And there's this a lot of conversation around technology that a lot of people is saying that it takes a lot of investment. And so for the sake of this conversation, I think investors also need to look at investing in machinery, big machinery
Yeah.
for production of food and everything. And I think that's very, very key. Thank you so much. Once again, guys, if you're watching us from anywhere, this is Climate Wednesday. We are live on YouTube, we are live on Twitter, and we are live on Facebook. You can watch and watch and watch again. You can share it across your friends and family so that they can also understand the conversation we're having today. Because none of us, without food, I don't know how we are going to live. We just have to make sure that we talk about food and relating it to how the environment is conducive for food system, how is social and how governance structure also is into this conversation. So we move on now. Major sectors like such as transport, harvest sectors that aid in food production have been affected. And you've already mentioned a lot about technology, investment in all those things. So, what role can investment play in addressing this, such as transport sector that have been affected as well, harvest sectors, and other people that have been affected in this kind of space when it comes to food? So, what role can the investment play in addressing this? Do we need more investment? Do we need to re-strategize coming from the government angle, governance angle, all those kind of relating it to the ESG? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Um, I really think it's a more of leveraging on what we have and like re-strategizing. It's we need to harness to understand where we are at, and that's why I love research. We need R&D. When you do not research what are the programs happening, because we find out that many industries are doing the same thing in the government sector. You find, but there is no synergy. We need a lot of synergy. Now, let's go back to the transportation system. We need a different, we're moving, the world is fast moving. For me, I just talking about the issue of Nigeria and the third world. It's something that we would go on and on, but then it's for us. How do we begin to look at, especially the rail transport system? With that alone, if we're able to just fix our rail, we would find, the issue of food insecurity would reduce drastically, because now we will find out that there is the days that they're going to offtake maybe cargo food stuff from this part of from the south to the north, from the north to the south. And then, like I've said, we need people now to strategically come in with that technology. Like I said, it can be a private enterprise. It can actually even be using through government. It can actually be government giving grants and bringing innovations maybe to the youth and people. There's just so many beautiful ideas that we need to implement them. Like I said, you now come up now harvesters. We can invest in big mechanized farming, but that it's only those that are really wealthy that can afford this. So if we have that in different zones and people have access to them, you can have harvesters instead of me spending over a week, 2 weeks harvesting. If I have those harvesters that would come, it will harvest it very fresh. And then now there's the company, the transport company now of taking these things from the farmers, those that are processing those. So when those times are reduced, we find out that the food is fresher, and then we're able now to churn in and then to, it gets right down to the table, from your farm to your table, or from the farmers to you straight up. So, we need strategic investors. I don't just want to keep saying investors because we have those programs, but then we need those that, working in synergy with the transport section, with the farmers union. For me, is to have cluster of farmers, to have this farmers union, stronger union, and to break down the issue of the middlemen. I can tell you that most farmers, that's why we have subsistent farmers and people into subsistent agriculture in Nigeria. They barely even make profit because at the end of the day is they go to the farm, they spend a lot of money, they borrow, and then the middlemen will just come and buy it at very, very negligible prices. And then the next thing, they're selling it at exorbitant prices. So if they have these clusters, if they have this, this community, and they're able now to make negotiations, and then the investors will now offtake from them, value for their money, and also in the transport system, imputing it into whatever program they have, and then actually getting to the transporter, to the producer, to those that are doing the finished work. It's going to just be, a fantastic way to reduce our food insecurity. So really is, yes, we need investors, but then we need strategic and innovative ways, not just to keep reinventing the wheel. We need to do things differently because the times have changed.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Let me just say that end hunger, achieve food security, and improve nutrition and promote sustainable agriculture is just the way forward in this conversation.
Yes.
And it's our right to continue to understand that ESG is very, very important. And if you don't work along this conversation, this ESG, a lot of people, like last week, we talk about how to report it. Now we are talking about strategic investors in our food production, which is very, very key that we need to. And thanks to our speaker today, she has been able to give us understanding of the kind of investors we're actually looking at. They must be strategic, not anyhow investors that we're looking at. Thank you so much. And I'm very happy that you're doing this. Moving closer to the end of this conversation, what should be the role of CSOs, private
Okay.
bodies, and
Okay.
governments in this
Okay.
space? What should be their role?
Well, basically, the role of CSOs should be, like we have just said, is they should be more strategic. CSOs need to come together. The issue of, yes, there's profitability in this, but then, like I said, is to churn, to change up innovation. We cannot do without innovation, and then to create the space more, for sustainability, to be beyond just leadership, beyond just the company should be beyond just me, and then the environment, the space we are in, the development space, it's to incorporate these things and then to also have policies, for us to, the policies are there, but for us now to really evaluate these policies and then to hold the government accountable and then to see what we are doing in our space. Yeah, the CSOs are doing a very good job. Can we do better? Oh, yes, the issue of accountability, the issue of innovation, and then the issue of, new technologies and new things, not just wanting to do things the way we have been doing, but to be susceptible to change and to be flexible enough to include also, I'm more, like I told you, the issue of gender, to involve women in the space, because, when women are in the space, there's just, you're bringing up so many things, generations are being leveraged and are being changed, so it's to bring in youth, women into this space more, and then the issue of innovation, and then to be able to sustain what we have started. Sustainability is just really key.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Role of CSO. But for us to close this call today, I just want to hear from you. What is that message, that strong message in one sentence that you want to send to the world leaders? And we capture the conversation we're having concerning the ESG and COVID-19 implication on COVID-19 and focusing on food security. What would be your strong message to the world leaders? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. My message would be that acting sustainably should not be viewed as cost, as expensive, but it should be an investment, and an investment that the return on investment would be more. It's more when we invest. We shouldn't look at the immediate amount we're putting in right now, but we should look at the return on investment and how it's going to affect lives and lives yet unborn. And if we want to achieve the issue of food security, if we want to achieve the issue of zero hunger, we need to invest now. And the time is now, not tomorrow.
Thank you very much, Remichi. Thank you for giving us your time to speak with us today. And for our viewers, if you have any question, drop them on the chat box on all our social media platforms. We're going to share it with our speaker, and she will be getting our feedback if there's anyone. Thank you so much for your time, and I wish you a blessed week ahead. Thank you, and have a great day.
Thank you very much, Olumide. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you everyone for another yet edition of Climate Wednesday today. And I'm sure that you've been able to pick one or two things from this conversation we've had. It's a very long, opportunity for us to put this together on ESG implication of COVID-19 and focusing on food production. And I'm very sure that one or two observations have been made. A key focus area on our engagement will be for us to protect our food system, and the food chain should be a chain that is going to help the local entity, the local people. And we've also talked about strategic investors, which they are very, very key when it comes to investing into food system. Sustainable and ESG investment is one of the key conversations that we need to take forward. And we also know investors are not purely financial, but also social actors with a corporate responsibility. So how are we making sure that we are responsible when it comes to environment, when it comes to social, and when it comes to governance? It's very, very important that we need to look at so that they can focus on securing and distributing food for more population. This is why we're having this conversation. And the issue of environmental justice, climate justice is something that we also need, working with other investors. We also look at the way we want to seek to highlight example of best practices that our speaker have done today, and share this more widely with all our viewers, as well as pressing companies with poor standard of production, and to step up their wider responsibility to make sure that we're having sustainable food production, and we're having a bring back better mechanism, so that our food system in Africa, our food system in Nigeria will be a sustainable way. Thank you so much. And we want to wish you all a very good evening, good afternoon, and good morning anywhere you are watching us from. See you next week on another edition of Climate Wednesday. Have a great evening. Bye.